Every year, Apple sells over 200 million iPhones worldwide in nearly every country with functioning retail infrastructure. It's arguably the single most recognizable consumer product on the planet, sold in over 175 countries through official Apple channels alone. So, when you hear that a handful of countries have actually banned, blocked, or heavily restricted the iPhone, entirely or in part, it sounds almost impossible. What kind of country turns down access to one of the most in-demand products in the world? The answer isn't ideology, and it isn't really about the phone itself. It's sanctions law, currency protection, domestic manufacturing policy, and national security anxiety, each one a completely different mechanism. Each one producing the same headline, banned. Here's exactly where the iPhone faces real restrictions around the world, and the specific reason behind every single one. Banned, North Korea. The most absolute restriction on this list. iPhones aren't just discouraged in North Korea, they're effectively unobtainable and illegal for ordinary citizens to possess. The country operates under a near-total information blackout, with the regime controlling nearly all technology access available to its population. Any foreign smartphone, iPhone included, represents an uncontrolled channel to outside information and communication, something the North Korean government treats as a direct threat to its authority and its tightly managed information environment. Citizens caught with unauthorized foreign devices can face serious legal consequences, ranging from confiscation to formal criminal charges depending on the circumstances and perceived intent. Even domestically produced smartphones in North Korea are engineered with built-in surveillance and content restriction features, monitoring what users access and blocking unauthorized software. Against that backdrop, an iPhone isn't simply a banned product, it's treated as a potential tool of foreign influence, making this less a trade restriction and more a total information control policy, with iPhones caught directly in the crossfire. Iran, Syria, Sudan, and Cuba. These four countries share a common thread: long-standing United States trade sanctions, imposed for reasons ranging from nuclear proliferation concerns to allegations of terrorism sponsorship to broader human rights and foreign policy disputes. Apple, as an American company, is legally barred from selling products or providing services directly into these markets, regardless of what local consumer demand looks like. This isn't Apple choosing to exclude these countries by preference or business judgment. It's U.S. export control law making direct sales illegal under threat of significant legal and financial penalty for the company itself. That said, sanctions don't erase demand, they just redirect it. Gray market and second-hand iPhones still circulate in all four countries through third-party importers, informal resellers, and cross-border trade routes, just without any official Apple involvement, warranty coverage, or authorized service access. Prices in these secondary markets tend to run significantly higher than official retail elsewhere, and buyers accept real risk around device authenticity, software support, and long-term repairability. Since Apple's official service network simply doesn't extend into these countries at all. Russia, following the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Apple formally suspended all direct sales and official operations inside Russia, joining more than 1,000 Western companies that pulled back from the Russian market in response to the conflict. Officially, that means no Apple Store presence, no direct shipments from Apple, and no Apple Pay functionality within the country. Unofficially, iPhones never actually left the Russian market in any meaningful sense. The Russian government legalized what's called parallel importing just weeks after Apple's exit, allowing domestic retailers to bring in genuine Apple products through third countries, Turkey, Kazakhstan, the United Arab Emirates, and China among the most common routes, without Apple's authorization or involvement. iPhone 17 models have already surfaced in Moscow stores at significant markups, sometimes 50% or more above Western retail pricing, arriving through supply chains Apple has no official control over. It's a striking demonstration that a corporate exit doesn't necessarily mean a product actually disappears from a market. It just becomes more expensive, less officially supported, and dependent on a workaround the manufacturer never approved. China, government and state employee restrictions. China represents a more targeted institutional restriction rather than a nationwide consumer ban of any kind. Reports beginning in September 2023 indicated Chinese authorities directed employees at several central government agencies and state-owned enterprises to stop using iPhones for official work purposes. Part of a broader ongoing push toward domestic technology independence and heightened data security concerns within government institutions specifically. Regular Chinese consumers can still freely buy, own, and use iPhones without any restriction whatsoever, and China remains one of Apple's largest and most important markets globally, generating billions in annual revenue for the company. The restriction specifically targets government and state-linked employment, reflecting Beijing's broader anxiety about foreign devices operating inside politically sensitive institutions and potentially exposing government communications to foreign surveillance or data collection. Not any rejection of the iPhone as a consumer product for the general public. Indonesia, this is the clearest example of an outright complete consumer sales ban on this entire list, and it's rooted entirely in domestic manufacturing law, not politics, security, or international conflict. Indonesia enforces a local content requirement, commonly known as TKDN, mandating that a specific percentage of a smartphone's components be manufactured, assembled, or invested in domestically before that device can be legally sold anywhere within the country's borders. When the iPhone 16 launched globally, Apple hadn't yet met Indonesia's investment threshold under this policy, and as a direct result, the phone was completely blocked from official retail sale nationwide. Reportedly, not a single iPhone 16 was sold through legal, authorized channels in Indonesia during its entire launch window, a striking, almost unprecedented example of a purely regulatory, economic policy-driven ban rather than any security or political conflict standing in the way. Indonesia has used this same TKDN framework against other foreign electronics brands as well, treating it as a consistent tool to pressure global manufacturers into local investment, rather than simply exporting finished products into one of Southeast Asia's largest consumer markets. Turkey's restriction traces back to 2022, during a period of significant economic strain. Sharp currency devaluation and mounting pressure on the country's foreign currency reserves. Facing a rapidly declining Turkish lira, Turkish authorities restricted new iPhone activations tied to specific import documentation and device registration regulations. Part of a broader government push to reduce high-value foreign electronics imports and protect the country's dwindling hard currency reserves during an economically volatile period. The policy created real, tangible friction for everyday consumers attempting to register new devices, often requiring additional paperwork, fees, or import documentation that hadn't previously been necessary. While specific rules have shifted somewhat over time as Turkey's broader economic situation has evolved, Turkey's iPhone import and registration environment remains considerably more restrictive, bureaucratic, and costly than most of Europe, effectively functioning as an economic disincentive rather than a formal, absolute ban. Why banned rarely means what you'd expect. Here's the pattern running underneath every single country on this list. Almost none of these restrictions come from a government simply deciding the iPhone itself is dangerous, undesirable, or ideologically unacceptable. They come from sanctions law, currency protection policy, domestic manufacturing requirements, or narrow, targeted government employee security directives. Genuinely banning a consumer product outright for every citizen, with absolutely no workaround, is rare, expensive to enforce consistently, and often politically costly given how deeply embedded smartphones have become in daily life and commerce. What actually happens instead is friction, layered and specific to each country's particular policy goal. Sanctions push buyers toward gray markets and informal resale networks. Local content laws push multinational companies toward either meeting investment thresholds or forfeiting access to an entire national consumer market. Targeted government restrictions aim at employees and institutions specifically, while leaving the broader civilian population completely untouched. In nearly every case on this list, underlying consumer demand for the iPhone didn't disappear at all. Only the official, Apple-authorized path to acquiring one did, which usually just means someone, somewhere, finds a workaround at a markup routed through a neighboring country's supply chain, putting it together. So when you hear that the iPhone is banned somewhere, the real story is almost always more specific, more bureaucratic, and more interesting than a simple, flat prohibition. North Korea represents genuine, near absolute restriction tied to total information control over its population. Iran, Syria, Sudan, and Cuba are blocked by U.S. sanctions law targeting Apple as an American company, not by any local rejection of the product itself. Russia officially exited the market entirely, but never actually left in practice, propped up by a government-sanctioned parallel importing scheme moving genuine devices through friendly third countries. China restricts government employees and state institutions specifically, while ordinary consumers remain completely untouched and continue buying iPhones freely. Indonesia enforces a real, complete, nationwide sales ban, but strictly over unmet domestic manufacturing investment law. Turkey's restrictions were born from a currency and economic crisis, not politics or security concerns at all. Same product, sold by the same company, but 6 completely different legal and economic mechanisms standing between a consumer and an authorized iPhone purchase. Depending entirely on which country's specific law, sanction, or economic policy happens to be in the way. Subscribe to Faulty Blueprint because every failure, every restriction, every banned product has a design behind it, and we're just getting started.